Welcome to the Teaching Journeys podcast, hosted by Dave Roberts. Humanity possesses a unique skill, the ability to pass knowledge from one generation to the next. This podcast embraces that ability, offering learning opportunities through conversations with extraordinary guests. Dave aims to leave a positive mark on individuals around the world. So before you dive into today's episode, please share this podcast with your network, including friends, family, and colleagues. And please consider leaving a rating or review. Your support makes all the difference.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Teaching Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Dave Roberts, and today it is my pleasure to have as my guest a fellow Central New Yorker who lives about 20 minutes away from me in upstate New York, Sally Davidson. Let me tell you a little bit about Sally. Sally Davidson is a shamanic Reiki master and a trauma-informed breathwork guide. She's also a certified inner alignment coach and has been trained in transcendental meditation and mindfulness. Sally is also a board-certified nurse coach and has 29 years of experience, including time in oncology and ICU. Sally, welcome to the Teaching Journeys podcast. It's a pleasure having you on the show today.
Oh, Dave, I'm so excited to be here with you today.
And I was on your Connection Project podcast
Yep.
a while back. We had a great conversation. I think that's kind of an unstated norm is that we support each other by being guest and host on our respective podcasts. So, but I'm looking forward to a real great conversation. You have a world of experience. I know you've helped many people, with the talents that you have. And I'm just anxious to get started and have our listeners get to know more about you.
I'm excited to be here and get started.
All right. My first question, Sally, is please tell our listeners about the experiences that have shaped your life path and your life passions.
So, that's a big question. So I'm a nurse and I'm a mom, I'm a nurse, I'm a wife. And, I was pretty much going through life in my nursing career when I left my job a few years ago and left that nursing kind of corporate world because I was in a leadership position at that point. I didn't leave because I didn't love it. I left because I guess I was burnt out. And burnout is a big word that we use a lot now, where it can get overplayed a little bit. And I would love to blame it all on healthcare, but I come to find out now, 3 years down the road, that it's not, it wasn't all healthcare's issue. Healthcare has some definite problems.
Mm-hmm.
I started to take a real responsibility of what my life was looking like. And it felt I had been at my job at that point 28 years or so in the same facility. I was a director of nursing when I left. So I had moved up the chain. I had a lot of critical care experience, oncology, as we said. I did a lot of different things. And I loved what I did, but I just was feeling, I don't know. I just wasn't feeling like I thought I should be feeling. And it wasn't so much reaching for like the stars of things I didn't have. It was more of this internal feeling of just feeling unsettled. And I honestly, I'd lived through COVID. I was running 2 ICUs and 2 different hospitals across town, and things were really crazy during COVID. That probably was a bit of a catalyst for me. I mean, I survived COVID, and I realize now that I survive in chaos, so that's good for me. Like, I lived in a very chaotic household and an alcoholic household, and I had a lot of childhood trauma that I really didn't realize, I guess, affected my life as much as it did. So fast forward to this amazing nursing career that people would be thinking I'm at the top of my game. I just was not feeling like settled or complete, or I didn't even feel like I knew who I was anymore. So I ended up in therapy with my husband because I thought he was the issue. And I talk about this very openly. I thought he was the issue, second marriage. And I was like, okay, now this is going to go down the tubes because I just nothing seems right. And it was really in therapy that I realized, oh, it's not all him. And so, I have a big part in this because the way I show up in life is I see life through a lens that is maybe, I guess, a little foggy sometimes. So my perspective was kind of skewed sometimes. Doesn't mean that things weren't happening to me, but my perspective on them was a little bit skewed. So I think in my work life, work became very overwhelming for me. And I started having panic attacks and I was really depressed. I felt like I just couldn't do my job anymore. Things that seemed very simple normally to me. I would be in a very basic meeting in the morning and I was like not even be able to focus. And I just felt very overwhelmed. And so I wasn't really sure what it was. I really thought a lot of it was the healthcare and different things. So I ended up taking some time off. I took a 3-month leave of absence because I was completely overwhelmed. The therapist thought you really need to decompress and it's not going to take a week. And I started to uncover some real deep childhood wounds, really recognize how I was shaped, how my patterns were shaped, how my personality was shaped. And it was not going to take me a week to kind of uncover that. And I was working in a job that required me to work a lot. Even if I wasn't there, you're kind of on call and you're always need to be ready, which always really did serve me in the past. Like I was a critical care nurse, ICU, ran ICUs, and I was good at that because, again, I thrive in chaos.
Mm.
Like that's my safety point. I didn't recognize what that was. So I took some time off and we had a lot of leadership changes at that time where I was, and there was a lot of changes happening. And when I took time off, I remember my husband saying he was not sure that I should do that because we both work there. I felt like it'll be fine. This is what I need. I need to be courageous and take this time. It was a really hard decision. But he was right. It was really definitely, I felt like almost like I had a little bit of a scarlet letter when I came back. And then we had leadership changes. I was treated very poorly. And I don't want this to be about that, but it is part of the story, which then really, again, my mental health, that really damaged me because I was really committed to my job for so many years. And I'm thinking, wow, I need some time off and some help. And now this is kind of how I'm treated. I think that we still have this stigmatized mental health that people, or maybe are depressed. And it goes from 0 to 100 of, just get a pill, get better, and just keep doing your job. Nobody really wants to hear. Yes, we have employee assistance in places and stuff, but really, honestly, if we're honest and having an honest conversation, people really, companies, businesses, healthcare, they don't want to hear about stuff like that. It shows as a weakness, and that's how it was seen for me. So that was a big learning lesson. But I'm not sorry I did it because it is part of my path. And I took my time off. I did go back to work and things were very different. I ended up getting promoted, but that's a whole nother story on how that even happened. And they were resistant, but there was so many changes at the time. I ended up leaving anyway, which probably was like a self-fulfilling prophecy. They're probably like, oh, of course she left. But I left for many reasons and took a different path because I was really starting to uncover stuff about myself. And when you start to awaken, I guess, on a spiritual journey and start to really understand your old traumas and how your DNA even works in your body, like how your nervous system is surviving. And luckily, I was able financially to leave and start my own business, which, is rough and can be difficult as a solo entrepreneur. But I've been following this path for a few years, and I continue to uncover parts of myself, wounds in myself that have patterned me to see the world a certain way. And I think it's really hard for people, and I see it with my clients, for us to even know that. Like, I didn't even understand what that was. And I guess for your audience, what a good example of that is I would think someone, say my husband, would be saying something to me, but I would hear it a very different way. The way I received the message would be very different than maybe what his intention was. And that can really mess with you because then you're kind of both, the other one side doesn't know what the other side is really feeling, doesn't understand it. And so I ended up taking kind of an early retirement for my job and leaving, which was, I think, very unexpected. And then I started my own business. And so I've been coaching and I've been on my own spiritual awakening journey, whatever we want to call it these days, exploring different aspects of holistic healing modalities and really starting to understand. Because I have to tell you, Dave, I was blown away that I had been a nurse for like whatever, at that point, 29 years, now 30 some years.
Mm-hmm.
Blown away that we don't understand and we're not teaching people in healthcare, physicians, whoever, nurses, that we don't understand the way the nervous system works, the way that trauma is rooted in the body. I mean, this isn't woo, as my husband would call it in the beginning. I mean, this is science-based stuff now. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and how that is really running our lives. Like, unfortunately, our past is running our life today. And if we don't get a kind of a handle on it, it will run your life. It will, as I say, drive the bus. You know, my inner teenager will be driving the bus and she wants to drive it off a cliff some days if I don't get her under control. And so, yeah, it's been quite a journey for me to get to this point. And through that, I found these different modalities. It started with a yoga teacher training, and then I started to exploring this inner alignment with an amazing mentor of mine, Kim Beekman, and we did a lot of trauma work, getting to the root of my issues, nervous system work. I got into meditation, mantra work, and then I found breathwork, which has really been a catalyst for a huge change for me and so many of my clients. And energy work. I mean, energy is everything. So we're made of energy. So I mean, that there's a lot more to it, but that's the catalyst. I mean, I think that I thought it was just my job because healthcare is a tough situation right now, but it wasn't just my job. I mean, uh, it was a lot of things. And I think for a lot of us, it is always a lot of things. It's not just one thing. It's one thing usually that tips you. And probably COVID was post-COVID and post-COVID healthcare and the cuts and the situations that I was in, telling a pregnant woman that she's going to have to get vaccinated. And I don't want this to be about vaccination, but I was not against COVID vaccination, but I was against someone. I don't think we knew enough as far as if someone was pregnant, like if they really wanted to take a shot and then they lost their jobs. And there was just so many things during that time that I don't think we even thought about what the mental health aspects were going to be post-COVID, especially in healthcare. So that's where I am today. I'm in private practice. I have a virtual and in-person, less in-person right now, but mostly virtual right now, clients, and just helping people find where the root of their problem is and trying to help them clear that.
That's quite the journey from an addicted, chaotic household to now helping individuals find peace through holistic practices that have an empirical foundation in science. And there's a couple of things as you were talking that I just want to reflect on and give my observations on, if I may. One is when you are, and I've worked as an addiction professional with individuals who have come from chaotic situations, and they learn that chaos is normal. So they're either going to gravitate to positions or jobs where they're comfortable dealing with chaos because that's what they know. And I've had clients tell me that it was so normal for me to just grow up in chaos. I didn't know any other way. So they gravitated to relationships and jobs that would reinforce how they were able to relate to the world as children. And as far as the mental health aspect in healthcare, I think you're right about the stigma. There's still a stigma around mental health being a bad thing. And I also think the concern that I have is, again, and this has been since the 80s, Sally, since I've been a human service practitioner, now retired, but the number of resources available to treat the people who needed it were always less. And we have a supply and demand issue. There's less resources to deal with those individuals who need treatment than, the number of people that need treatment. And that's something I think that the playing field needs to be leveled on that as well. As far as the challenges in healthcare, my wife is a retired nurse, and we talked about the challenges with staffing, with consistency of policy, with retention of employees, and all of that weighed on heavily on her to the point where she opted to retire. So, and the other thing I think was interesting for me is that when you sat in the quiet, when you were away from the chaos, everything kind of just fell into place, and you realized that there was a lot on you that you had to work with, but also you realized the benefit of the other practices that you were able to embrace and how that can help individuals transcend their own challenges.
Yeah, I do want to mention one thing about that. When I did leave, there was a lot of grief, even though it was my
Yep.
choice that I did not expect. And so for people listening, like we think of grief, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know as the grief guy, but this is something that's really come to fruition for me. I used to just think about grief as death, right? But grief is
Hmm.
so much more than that. And I really experienced a year at least, if not more, of deep, deep grief about leaving my job because things change immensely. And the reality is, if you are addicted to chaos and addicted to being needed and addicted to service and
Yep.
addicted to the busyness and like the phone ringing and even though you complain about it, you don't understand that you're addicted to it. You don't
Yeah.
know you're addicted to it. I can say it now, but I don't think I knew in the moment like that's what drove me. And even though I chose to leave, boy, that was a struggle for me.
Yeah.
And I have to say, it's probably the last 6 to 9 months that I've really started to allow myself to even receive the quiet,
Yeah.
to receive the ability for me to enjoy this snowfall this morning at my house and thank God my life is good. My husband, I remember saying to me, but I mean, you chose to leave. Like, I don't understand. Like, there wasn't in a plan for you to leave work. And now I've supported you leaving work. And now you're depressed because you fuck. And there was a lot of that happened. And then I didn't recognize right away that there would be a grieving period, even though it was my choice, 100% my choice. And that was an important piece for me. Then I had to work
Yeah.
through that, which was not easy.
No, and we talk about losses related to death and symbolic loss, which is the loss of relationships, the loss of dreams of the future. It could be the loss of identity as it relates to our work identity. It could be just about anything. And
Mhm.
when I retired, I went through a period of grief myself because of the fact that I was grieving the loss of specific relationships that I had made in the workplace. I was getting nostalgic over the clients that really touched my life, and all of that created some profound sadness for me. But I had to leave for my own mental health because the system was just getting more and more non-responsive to the needs of line staff and middle management
Mhm.
supervisors. And I could not see myself in a situation where I was going to be continually unhappy. So when I had the opportunity to retire, I did, and I haven't looked back.
No, I agree. And, I heard a quote the other day, and I don't want to take credit for it, but that's out there. And it says, what you don't change, you choose.
Yep.
And so I was in a place where I was complaining, and people were in my office complaining, and everybody was complaining about how horrible it was. But we chose to stay there because we liked our paycheck and we liked whatever. And so I chose it. And I finally had to decide to choose to do the scary thing and leave. I mean, the safe thing was to stay, but the scary thing was to leave. And sometimes you have to make a choice. There is a fork in the
Hmm.
road. And I do think that I chose the right path. I think that I don't even know exactly what's ahead of me yet in this season of my life as I turn 60 in March coming up, right? So I think this is where I'm supposed to be, exactly where I am today talking to you. I think this was the right choice because relationships change when you're not with those people every day. People that you
Yep.
think are your friends, you don't really hear from anymore. They just go to the next person and you're not needed. And those are all hard things, especially when you work in a place for a really long time. Some people had said to me, because I'm a board certified nurse coach, and what that means is I'm a coach, like a life coach, but I took a board certification, and this is a newer thing for nurses. And some people said to me, well, you're a director already, so you can make change from within. But I have to be honest, as what you just said, I felt at that time, in that moment, n- nobody wanted to hear what I had to say. And I didn't have the fight in me at that time to try to fight with people to make the change. I'm not saying that I wouldn't have that now, but I didn't have that at that point to like fight for that much change in healthcare, that there should be coaches in helping these nurses, with their problems, with their issues, with how to deal with burnout and so they don't get burnt out. I think that can change the nursing profession completely, this nurse coaching, especially if they were in hospitals, because who better to deal with the the nurse, then someone has been through it, right? Same
Yep.
with an addiction, right? Usually a lot of addiction specialists have had addiction. I'm not saying everyone, but I have a lot of addiction in my family, and I know what they say to me. Like, they don't want to hear from me. They really want to hear from someone that has
Yep.
lived and walked their path, right? So I think that nurse coaching is going to be a game changer in these hospitals if they could get their crap together to realize that this soft dollars that they call, like, that this, you're not charging for this, but this is going to help retention immensely, and it's starting to. But I didn't have it in me at that point to make that kind of change. Our organization was under so much change. Nobody cared what I had to say. And I didn't have that fight in me. I really wanted to help people that were ready to be helped, that wanted change, that wanted something different. And I kind of felt a little guilty about that, but I had to let that go because I don't think that was my circus to be in the middle of that chaos at that time. My mental health was much more important, and that's really a hard decision to make, as you said, like, because in this country, it is stigmatized as a weakness,
Mhm.
and that, I couldn't hack it, or, I knew she couldn't hack it, or whatever people said, when the reality is, I think it's a more courageous move because most people are just going through the motions because they have so much fear. And what happens is we end up sick. We end up with an autoimmune disease, a cancer. I'm 100% in the belief system now that when we have a dysregulated nervous system, and that when we are pushing ourselves beyond what we are capable of, because that's what's expected of us, or we think that's what is expected, it will manifest into a physical illness. Besides a mental illness, it will manifest as a physical illness.
Yep.
And I had those issues too. I absolutely had a nerve issue post hysterectomy. I had a second surgery to try to fix this nerve issue. It was there for over a year. It was debilitating. I didn't want to talk about it. It was so painful. And it wasn't because somebody clipped the nerve. I started doing my work, I call it. I started getting into programs with meditation. I started doing trauma work. I had had this pain for a year, at least a year. And I woke up one day and the pain wasn't there. This was after I had started on my routine meditation, morning
Mhm.
meditation, breath work. I had, really gone on a path of healing, and I was very consistent. One day it wasn't there. And then the next day it wasn't there. I almost was afraid to even acknowledge that it wasn't there. And it didn't even click right away that that was correlated to me regulating my nervous system. And whether people want to believe that or not, but 100% I believe it was correlated. And now that pain, I'm telling you, is my barometer. When I start to get stressed, even if I don't even recognize I'm getting stressed, but there's a lot
Mm.
going on, that pain will twinge, will come back. And then I'll be like, oh, okay, I hear you. I literally talk to my body. I'm like, I hear you. And either have to up my meditations, I have to slow down a little bit, I have to give myself more self care. And so when people say that's not true, I'm like, okay, well, you're going to find out, because
Mhm.
we are not meant to work at the pace and the intensity that we do in this country. Our bodies are not meant for that.
No. And we get so busy chasing things that ultimately in the long run don't really matter as much as we think they did, that we sacrifice ourselves physically with physical ailments, and also with mental well-being issues. And there is definitely a mind body connection, that how we think, how we act, what we believe impacts our physical health. And this goes back to Dan Condren's work. He's with permanent healing, where he talks about the specific thought and how that aligns with a specific physical ailment, and what individuals can do to modify the thought to change how they're feeling physically. And I think there's a lot of connection to that. Obviously, it's always good to have the supervision, be under the medical supervision of a
Oh, of
competent
course.
doctor. But at the same time, I've seen this in my own life where my thoughts were negative and I would feel it physically. And when I was feeling confident, feeling positive, I had a whole host of energy that I had access to, and I felt good physically, and I felt more engaged in life. So there is that definite mind body. And we take a look at mind body spirit connection that we really need to be mindful of in the healthcare professions and beyond. So You talked a little bit about breath work, and I know that's something that's you're passionate about. Tell our audience, what does breath work involve? And what have you seen to be the specific benefits of breath work to both our physical and mental well-being, and even transcending trauma, such as grief or
Oh,
any
yeah.
other type of trauma? So if you could touch on that
Yeah,
for a bit, Sally, that'd be great.
sure. I started kind of connecting more with breath work because I started out meditating
Hmm.
and I took transcendental meditation. My husband and I, because he felt that was less woo, I guess he calls it less woo for him. So we did a course in transcendental meditation. We were meditating. I started to see the benefits of that. And then when I started my healing journey, when I did my program, we did a lot of meditation and mantra work. We did some breath work, but it was mainly meditation and mantra work and trauma work, soul retrieval, trauma release. And so what I was finding when I started taking in my own clients, meditation is amazing. I meditate every morning. I can go into a deep meditation pretty quickly now, but it wasn't always that way. And so what I was seeing with clients is that, you would say the word meditate and they're like, oh, I can't do that. I started to recognize, yes, it is hard for people that are really from that hustle mentality. They're addicted to the chaos. They're an overachiever. Their nervous system, as I call it, just like quivering with dysregulation. Now I'm like, okay, well, what's going to fix this is we're going to meditate. You know, it's not a one size fit all, I guess I want to say,
Hmm.
right? So we
Hmm.
have to slowly titrate some people. If you're at this level, we have to titrate. And I'm using my hands so the people on the podcast aren't going to see that, but on the YouTube they will. So then I kind of got clued more into breath work. And, breath work can mean so many things, right? It can be from a simple box breath where you're breathing in for 4, holding for 4, exhaling for 4, holding for 4.
Yeah.
Down up to like Wim Hof, where you're like, for the listeners, just check out Wim Hof breathing. I mean, it's like very intense breathing. And what I love about the breath, whether you're doing a box breath or you're doing some really crazy 3-hour breathwork journey with somebody, the breath kind of gives that monkey mind, that overthinking, busy mind, something to think about. So when you ask someone to just slow down, start to meditate, which sounds so easy, right? But very difficult for a lot of us
Hmm.
to slow our busy, busy mind down. Well, when we give them something to do, our mind likes something to do. So we have
Hmm.
them concentrate on the breath, the pattern of the breath, no matter what the pattern is. And I call it gets them kind of under the wave because for most people, if they concentrate on the breath, the next thing they know, they're under like the crashing of the wave and they kind of get under it. And then boom, they're kind of in, I call it. Like when you're
Hmm.
meditating and you get in that zone, you kind of get under the wave. And then when you're under that crashing wave, you get to the other part where the wave isn't crashing and it's kind of blissful. And I feel like that's what happens with breath. It's almost like a bait and switch to me because we give the mind something to think about. And then before you know it, you kind of settle in. Now, does that
Hmm.
always happen? No, but for the most part, I think it does. And the kind of breath that I do lots of different breath with people. So when we deep breathe, we hit the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is going to hit into the parasympathetic. We're going to get to rest and digest. We're going to start to relax. That's not woo. That's not like some spaced out thing I made up or somebody in a book made up. That's what happens in the body. We do that in healthcare. We sit with a patient, we breathe with them. The thing we're not taught is really how that actually is working. Like I remember
Hmm.
doing this, sitting with a patient, doing physical touch, breathing with them, having them look in my eyes, but I didn't really understand that I was connecting with them in this heart coherent type of way so that I was taking my relaxed nervous system and having them attached to it so that they would relax, right? And in breath, we can do that.
Hmm.
And so the type of breath that I've mainly been doing, I do all different types, but I do these breathwork journeys, I call them, and somatic, soma, the body. We're connecting to the body. And what can happen in these journeys blows my mind every time. You can connect to parts of your trauma and release it through your subconscious. And you can connect with parts of your family, maybe, or someone that's passed on. You can feel the presence of your passed on mom in a breathwork journey. I say a 90-minute breathwork journey, but we're not breathing for 90 minutes. We're breathing for maybe 35, 40 minutes. Part of that is just an easy meditation in the beginning, but we're able to connect through active breath to parts of us that we can't even access in therapy. And I'm not downing therapy. I go to therapy. I'm a therapy girl. I've been in therapy a couple of years because my therapist meets one thing for me, but my holistic practices meet other things for me.
Yep.
And breath work allows clients to connect to these parts. I've had people in my sessions that have no idea why they're coming. They haven't done any kind of holistic modalities. They lay down for a breathwork session and they are like, what the heck just happened?
Yep.
And sometimes there's some resistance. And I say this in the beginning. I always say, listen, there's going to be someone in here that falls asleep. Perfectly fine. It's probably what you needed. There's going to be someone that is feeling like, this lady's crazy. What kind of music is she playing? What is she doing? What is she saying? Because I do a lot of positive affirmations during the breathwork session and I play music during my journeys. And there's going to be somebody here that's going to maybe connect to a younger version of themselves, maybe see an old memory. What I have found, Dave, is that people are accessing parts of themselves. Now, there's different aspects of how deep we can go. The journeys I'm doing locally right now and virtually are pretty grounding journeys. So you're accessing pieces of yourself, but we're not stirring up your deepest trauma. It's usually what I've seen for me is the way I'm doing it is that we're bringing out what's really in your subconscious, wanting to come out and maybe give you a message and let it come to your awareness. So now you can start to maybe work through it, maybe just be curious about it. Sometimes you release it. I've had people come that have not done any of this work. They come consistently once a week and they have made peace with their father. They have made peace with their mother. They have done forgiveness work all during their breathwork session where they are not even speaking. I mean, there's a lot of work now. Gabor Mate, Steve Levine, all these, Bessel van der Kolk, trauma is trapped in our body. And we cannot access it. I don't think. I'm not an expert, but it doesn't seem like we can access some of this through talk therapy. So I would love to see a world where we're referring each other. The therapist is referring to the holistic practitioner. The holistic practitioner is saying, I think this is too deep for me. Like, I think you need some talk therapy. The doctor is saying, listen, before you go on this medication for your depression, why don't you try out X, Y, and Z, and then let's decide whether you need medication. I'm not against medication. I just think that we need to really integrate because what I have seen blows my mind and being a healthcare practitioner for so long. So there's so many scientific things that happen as we're breathing, changes that happen in our body. Now, how do we able to access these subconscious things? I call it the psychedelics. Without the psychedelics, I call it the ability to access these things that some people are accessing with plant medicine or with mushrooms and psilocybin, which I think is something that really I know that we're looking into a lot of. And I think there's a lot of benefit there. I'm a proponent of those therapies because they're able to change the neural pathways. But I think with breath, we're doing it with our breath. Like we're able to do these things with our breath. Now there's breathwork sessions that I've been part of that take you even further where you're going deeper. You need more facilitators. You're taking people a little bit deeper into some of their old traumas for release. And I think that also can be done in a very safe way. But again, just like anything, you have to make sure you have a safe facilitator. You have to make sure you have integration. You may have to make sure that there is option for you to have discussion after. In my circles, we definitely have a share portion. And then I always open myself up after to say to people, if something came up for you that you don't feel comfortable sharing in the share circle, you reach out to me. I don't charge for that. Most people don't take me up on it, but I always open that door to say, listen, something you may go home and it may take you tonight to process what happened in your journey. And I always make myself open for that. But if you're doing deeper breathwork sessions, you have to make sure there's integration, just like anything. You can't just go to a 3-hour breathwork journey where this guy is going to take you to the depths of your darkness and back and then not have some integration.
Oh,
Integration is an important part so that you can process out what happened. I think our body gives us a lot of, what do I want to say? Our body is telling us stuff before our mind. We're just not listening. And so this mind, body, spirit connection and being open to spirit, right? But I do think breath work brings you to that place that you're more, my husband would call it woo, but he has finally come to some of my breathwork sessions. And the other day, I actually did a men's group and just men, which are a very underserved population, I think.
Yep.
And I had 8 men. I wasn't even sure how it was actually going to go because I haven't done just men, but the energy was unbelievable and the group shares were unbelievable. My husband was there. He had such an experience. I was so happy for him. And he was so blown away by the shares of the other men because that's not the environment he's in where men share.
Mhm.
And it was so healing and so beautiful that I'm going back to do another men's only night and hoping to expand on that because I think it's such an underserved population. And the energy does shift when the group is men versus women or mixed, because most of my groups are mixed, which is beautiful. But there is an energy shift if you just have women and you just have men. And that can be really, really healing and allow people to really open up in a different way and tap in. It has so many benefits. It really has shocked me what you're able to access with your own breath. And I just think we're going to be seeing more and more and more of this. And the breath is just amazing because, like what I always say to people, listen, meditation is amazing. And I love meditation. I'm a meditator.
Mhm.
But, I can't really go into a meditation when I'm out to dinner with people. I'm starting to get stressed. But I can take 10 deep breaths at the table, or I can go in the bathroom stall and do like 15 box breaths
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
then come back out. And I promise you, you may not go from a 10 to a 1, but you'll go from a 10 to a 6
Mhm.
with 10 or 15 box breaths or 10 or 15 deep breaths because it will just allow your body to go into that rest and digest. And that's something you can do completely on your own. So I just think it's a beautiful modality.
Yeah, I think it is too. And I have read that breath work can help individuals connect with their transitioned relatives on the other side,
Hmm.
even their pets, that they will have after death communication experiences that they may not have had previously. I think with regular practice, things like yoga, meditation, integrated breath work can reduce the barrier between the physical world and the other side or the afterlife. We can begin to look at the world multidimensionally. And I would agree, if you have a really, really great therapist, it's fabulous, but talk therapy by itself cannot facilitate the changes that I think a lot of holistic practices can, either separately or in
Hmm.
conjunction with good therapy. I've been going to Susan Roback, who's a shamanistic holistic practitioner for years. The work I've done with her, and I've been in therapy before, and I'm not knocking therapy.
Right.
There's a great benefit to therapy, but what she uncovered with me in maybe just a couple of 1-hour sessions gave me so much immediate insight and clarity, more so than maybe going to 2 or 3 months of therapy. So there's an integrated approach, good empirical based therapy, a good competent therapist who is willing to make room for integrated holistic approaches that can help individuals find clarity. I think that's going to be the wave of the future. I don't think you're going to see one size fits all anymore or one discipline fits all anymore. It's going to be more of an integrated, comprehensive approach, and it needs to be.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many places that these modalities can help. And I haven't even explored them all. But just when I sat in that men's group, I was like, why am I not marketing more in the men's world? Because I really mainly work with women, but I have men clients. I just end up with more women for whatever reason. The beauty of that men's group that night blew me away. What I love about this work is I learned so much from my clients and from the group energy. There's always something I take away or feel so honored to share in this experience with people. There's something that I definitely get from it that it just feels so good. And I gotta say, like, because of my trauma and my inability to feel like good about myself or not feel worthy enough or never feel like I fit in, those are some of my flavor of things that I struggle with. When I do breath work, when I connect, and I do believe it's my connection to spirit and my
Mhm.
intuition that I was lacking. I think that's always been there, but I probably denied it or didn't have time for it. So my reconnection, I guess, to spirit and my ability to be very open about having more faith in the universe, because I wouldn't say that I'm a religious person. I was raised Catholic, but I wouldn't say I'm religious anymore. I'm married to a Jewish guy. I have more faith in spirit and the universe and what's out there, and that there is something bigger than us. That is what I choose to believe. And I usually like to work with clients that are open because I bring that into my work with my clients, but I can pretty much work with anybody. It's always easier if someone is open to trying different aspects, a
Mhm.
shamanic, cord
Mhm.
cutting or a soul retrieval or, for me to talk about energy. And,
Mhm.
I love to work with clients that are curious and open. They can take what I say and whatever lands they take and whatever they don't. I always give them that choice. I always want my clients to feel like they have sovereignty over anything that I'm saying. They always have choice. I mean, that's
Yep.
a big part of what I do. And that's a big part of being trauma informed is that you want people to understand they have choice. I'm nobody's guru. I don't want to be anybody's guru. I don't know everything. I'm learning along with my clients as I do my own work. I have my own people that help guide me through this. I've recognized now I will probably always have a helper. Like I have my spiritual helpers and I'll always have my human helpers that are taking me along my journey as I continue to work through my own childhood trauma. And it isn't about
Mhm.
living in your old stuff. It's really about recognizing and being aware of what makes me tick and those
Mhm.
parts of me that were maybe stunted or are still a little bit angry because they come out. And for me not to get rid of them, but to love on them, those parts of my 5-year-old self and my 16-year-old self that experienced a lot of not happy moments. And they created me to be very defensive and angry. I could be pretty ragey and angry for many years. I had a one failed marriage, and I know now that every relationship I have, I bring something to the table. I'm not always the victim. And that's a hard pill to swallow at first. But the minute that you recognize that you have radical responsibility for your own life and how you
Mhm.
are going to choose your day to be, that's when your life will start to change. And sometimes that you can't do that on your own. You need a guide, such as a Susan Roback in your life. You need somebody in your life that can be your person. And sometimes that person changes. I have one client that's been with me like a year and a half. You know, I don't know if we just ended our contract and, she'll decide whether it's time for her, because sometimes it's time to move on to a new person. But I
Mhm.
just know for me, part of my life plan is that I have to carve out money because I always need a little help, and I'm okay with
Mhm.
that. That is not a
Mhm.
weakness. I think that's a strength to know that as I work through my being more aware of who I am and how I tick, it's important for me to have that reflection sometimes with
Yep.
somebody. It's just part of what I have to carve out. Like, I need this much money for groceries, and I need this much money for self-development, and I've become okay with that because I love learning about myself. Sometimes it's hard because
Mhm.
you come up against something and you're like, "Oh, am I projecting that? Is that their stuff?" But breathwork has really helped me and has helped a lot of people because the people especially that don't wanna talk about their stuff, it's amazing because they don't really have to. Eventually, I think they have to, right? As they're starting to process, they should integrate and talk about it. But in the
Mhm.
beginning, they just breathe and a lot of stuff is released. It is amazing. But I do think getting back to the connection to spirit, I think my connection to spirit has changed so much. I'm so open and curious, and I have to say, I do think that makes a difference in your life.
Yeah.
And whatever that is for you, whether it's Buddha, Jesus, whether it's your spirit animal, it doesn't matter to me. It's really just a connection with something larger than us.
Yep.
And I think your life starts to change when you open yourself up to that. I just know my life feels different, that I have a little more faith, and that I can ask the universe, and I can put that different tone. I mean, this happened to me this morning. I had so much snow at my house, and I was kind of annoyed, and we're supposed to get more snow. And even though I love this snow, my husband is away. And
Mhm.
so I talked to him this morning, and I was a little snarky about a few things. And then I stopped myself. I made a choice. I chose to be like, why are you doing that? Like, why? I really said to
Yeah.
myself, why are you really snarky to him this morning? Because he's away at a photography retreat, and I wanted him to go because he doesn't know how to relax. So here I sent him to relax, and now I'm giving him a hard time over something he can't do anything about right now.
Mhm.
And so before I would have stayed mad. Today it took me 5 minutes. Yes, I was snarky. I'm going to recognize that. But it took me about 5 minutes. I looked outside and I was like, what are you doing? It's beautiful out. I turned some music on. I started doing a few things before I was going to get on with you. And then I texted him and I said, there was no reason for me to do that. I'm very sorry. And I hope you have a great day. But in the past, I wouldn't have recognized that. I would have went into a victim mode. And today I said to myself, I choose to have a good day. I
Yeah.
choose to have a good day, and I choose not to project any of my worries about the weather later on someone else.
Well, and I think the more responsibility we take for our own actions, the more we empower ourselves to take that responsibility, the more control that we have over our lives and the better the quality of our life is. And mistakes are information. I mean, we're living a human experience. You've heard that saying we're spiritual beings living a human experience, and the human experience informs our spirit, and it gives us information in terms of how we can continue to grow. And that continued quest for self-awareness, plus being connected to something greater than ourselves, regardless of how individuals view spirituality. Those are two core tenets of individuals who strive for spiritual awareness. Um, and it's a beautiful, very individualized process. So, well, we could probably go on for about another hour, but
I was just thinking that. I was thinking, oh my God, I could just like talk to you forever.
yeah, we could just go on for another hour. But we're coming close to the end of our time, so I want to ask you a couple more questions.
Sure.
First of all, if you're going to leave our listeners with one thing today, one takeaway, or one takeaway with subcategories, what would that be?
Yeah. I think I would say that connection to yourself, to your body, to your breath is really important. And being aware of what that really means to you. So, really
Hmm.
just taking care of yourself and having self love. And so, however that has to happen for you, don't be afraid to reach out to someone and try to get help with that because we can only love others as deeply as we love ourselves.
Hmm.
And what I see with most people is they really just don't love themselves. I didn't love myself. I really didn't. I have to work on that every day to feel worthy enough to love myself. And that's why my relationships were difficult for me. So, self love, self care, it's more than just getting your nails done, like real self care. And it is not a weakness to need a little help with that. That doesn't mean you have to have a pay for a year-long coaching with me.
Hmm.
It means find a breath work in your community, find a breath work online. Like, right, I do stuff online, people do stuff online.
Hmm.
Find something, try something new, a holistic modality that maybe you never tried before. And I guess the biggest thing I would leave with is be the word curious. Curious was my word for 2024. Be curious. Be curious, be open to new things and trying new things because when you put yourself first, that is what needs to happen. You need to put yourself first and take the time for yourself. I think that's the biggest thing I would leave people with.
Staying curious allows us to continue to grow, to embrace new perspectives, and just to stay engaged with life and develop critical thinking skills, which are so important today in the society. So if people want to get in contact with you, find out more about Rooted Soul and upcoming events that you got going on, what's the best way for them to do that, Sally?
My website is sallydavidsoncoach.com. My business name is Rooted Soul, but my website is sallydavidsoncoach.com right now. You can email me, Sally Davidson Coach on Instagram, Sally Davidson on Facebook, and I'll share all my stuff with you. You can
Yep.
email me, you can just DM me, reach out. I do get on my email list. I'm being much more consistent with my emails. If you're local to the central New York area, if you get on my email list, it'll tell you where I'm going to do my local breath work. I'm usually out and about 3 to 4 times a month doing in-person sessions, but I do a lot of virtual right now, actually, but this will probably come out after that. I'm doing a Soulful Sundays on Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. I'm doing free breath work for the holidays because the holidays are such a difficult time for people. We think it's
Absolutely.
joyous, but it's really hard. So I've been offering 6 weeks of free breath work at 11 a.m. and we're doing community and connection together. And I'll decide in the new year how that's going to look. But actually, I've had like 20, 25 people every Sunday. It's been really, really nice. And people are connecting. Yeah. And so I do tons of stuff virtual. I coach women and men on getting to the root of their issues. I'm actually starting a group program, a hybrid virtual group program for women at the end of January. And it really is for those women that feel stuck, disconnected. And we're going to do all the trauma, shadow, inner child, deep healing work. So, yeah, I'll share that information.
Boy, we could have another podcast just about embracing your shadow. And, we never even really got to what you do with inner alignment coaching or obviously the Connection Project podcast. So we're going to have you back for round 2 so
All
we
right.
can get to all of that. So, Sally, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend with me and to share space with me. I know we're going to be doing this again.
Dave, thank you so much. I always love chatting with you, and I'm so glad to be able to talk to you in front of your audience. And yeah, it's always beautiful. Thank you.
You're welcome. And with that, that is a wrap on another episode of the Teaching Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Dave Roberts, wishing you peace.